Am I the a-hole for being hurt that my wife won't allow me to see the birth of our baby and asking for some space? My wife is 8 months pregnant with our first kid, and she has been finalizing her birth plan. She included me in the process, and I did my best to research and understand it. I went with her to see various doulas, picked a hospital together, established emergency plans, and sat through long discussions about pain management, interventions, and what to do if things didn't go according to plan. 4 months, I've been trying to do everything right. I read articles she sent me, watched videos she recommended, and even went out of my way to learn things I didn't fully understand at first, just so I could be present and supportive. I wasn't just nodding along either. I was asking questions, taking notes, trying to picture how everything would play out so I wouldn't be clueless when the time came. At some point early on, I just assumed I would be there for the birth. It never even crossed my mind that I wouldn't be. It felt like one of those core moments you don't miss, something you prepare yourself for mentally even if you know it's going to be intense. I wasn't expecting it to be easy or pretty. I knew it would be stressful, painful for her, and probably overwhelming for both of us in different ways. But I also thought it would be something we would go through together. There were small moments during the pregnancy that made me feel connected to everything. Sitting in the waiting room before appointments, hearing the heartbeat for the first time, watching her react to the ultrasounds. I remember the first time we saw the baby moving on the screen. It didn't feel fully real before that, but something shifted for me in that moment. I started imagining what it would be like to hold my daughter, what kind of father I'd be, and how everything in my life was about to change. I've also been trying to make things easier for her in general. Taking on more around the house, making sure she doesn't have to stress about small things, checking in on how she's feeling even when she says she's fine. There have been nights where she couldn't sleep properly, and I'd just stay up with her even if we weren't talking much. Just being there felt important. As the due date got closer, the birth plan became more detailed. It wasn't just general ideas anymore. It was specific preferences, specific people, specific steps. We talked about lighting in the room, music, who would be contacted and when, what kind of environment she wanted. I took all of it seriously because I know how much control matters in a situation like that, especially when so much of it is unpredictable. So when she told me she didn't want me to see my daughter being born, it didn't even register at first. She said it in a calm way, like it was just another detail in the plan. She explained that she only wanted her mother there during the actual birth and that I could come in after it was done to see the baby. There wasn't any build-up to it. It just came out as part of the conversation. I remember just sitting there for a second, trying to process what she had said. I thought maybe I misunderstood, so I asked her to clarify. She repeated it, still calm, still matter of fact. She said she would be more comfortable that way. That was it. No long explanation, no specific reason beyond comfort. It hurt more than I expected. I knew it was her body, her experience, and that she should feel as comfortable as possible. I've always believed that. But at the same time, it felt like I was being pushed out of something that I had been mentally preparing for this entire time. I tried to keep my reaction measured. I didn't want to turn it into an argument, especially not over something so sensitive. I asked why, hoping maybe there was something specific I could understand or even adjust for. But she just repeated that she would feel more comfortable with only her mother there. I didn't push after that. I told her that I would support whatever made her comfortable and that I would be on board with her decision. And I meant it. I don't want to make things harder for her, especially this late into the pregnancy. But I also told her that I was hurt. I didn't try to hide that part. I said I would need some space for a few days to take it in and process how I was feeling. It wasn't said in an angry way. It was more of an honest admission that I couldn't just switch off how I felt and act like everything was fine immediately. I didn't raise my voice or accuse her of anything. I just said I needed time. That night felt different. Not in an explosive way, but in a quiet, heavy way. We didn't really talk much after that. I ended up sleeping in the guest room, not as a punishment or anything like that, but because I didn't feel like I could lie next to her and pretend I was okay. I didn't sleep well. My mind kept going back to the same thoughts. Imagining being in the hospital, sitting somewhere outside, waiting to be told it was over. Missing the moment my daughter is born. Not hearing her cry for the first time in person. Not being there to support my wife in what is probably one of the hardest things she'll ever go through. At the same time, I kept reminding myself that this wasn't about me. That she's the one giving birth, that her comfort matters more than anything else in that moment. I kept going back and forth between understanding her perspective and feeling pushed aside. I left early the next morning before she woke up. I didn't want to have a conversation when I hadn't sorted out my own thoughts yet. I figured giving both of us a little space would be better than forcing an interaction that might turn into something unnecessary. That's when the messages started. At first, they were just questions about where I was and why I left so early. Then they shifted. She started saying that it was unfair for me to react this way. That I was punishing her for doing what's best for the baby. I didn't respond right away because I didn't know what to say that wouldn't make things worse. I wasn't trying to punish her. I wasn't trying to make her feel guilty. I just didn't know how to deal with what I was feeling. Then she called. She was crying and saying that I was putting stress on her during pregnancy for no reason. That I was making things harder for her when she needed support. She said I was being an asshole for needing space over something like this. Hearing that made everything more complicated. Because now it wasn't just about me being hurt. It was about her feeling hurt by my reaction. I tried to explain that I wasn't abandoning her or refusing to support her. I just needed a few days to process something that felt significant to me. But I don't think it came across the way I intended. The conversation didn't really resolve anything. Since then, it's been a mix of messages and missed calls. Some of them are more emotional, some more accusatory. It feels like she sees my need for space as something negative, like I'm doing it to make a point rather than because I genuinely don't know how to deal with this. Meanwhile, I'm just stuck in my own head about it. I keep thinking about all the steps leading up to this point. Everything we've done together during the pregnancy. All the assumptions I made about being there for the birth. It's not just about the moment itself, but what it represents. I also keep questioning myself. Whether I should have just said nothing and dealt with it internally. Whether asking for space was the wrong move, especially given her current state. At the same time, pretending to be okay doesn't feel right either. It feels dishonest. Like I would be ignoring something that matters to me just to keep things smooth on the surface. I don't think needing space for a few days is wrong. I'm not disappearing completely. I'm not refusing to support her long term. I'm just asking for a little time to process something that caught me off guard. But the way she's reacting is making me second-guess that. The idea that I'm somehow adding stress to her pregnancy or making things worse for her is sitting heavy with me. I can't pretend to be happy about missing the birth of our baby. I just can't. And I don't think it's realistic to expect that I would be immediately okay with it. She's so angry that I'm starting to wonder if I'm being a dick. Edit. No COVID restrictions for us. Edit 2. No, we're not the couple from the other post. My wife works from home, I don't work 14H, and I was there for every appointment since the beginning. Update. Thank you all for your input and advice. A lot has happened since I first posted, and things didn't really go the way I expected. My wife had the baby, and they're both healthy. Around her due date, I asked her again if she still didn't want me to be there during the birth. At that point, she didn't give a clear answer. She seemed unsure, and overall she was already under a lot of stress. As labor started, it was obvious she was anxious and overwhelmed, so I didn't push the topic again. The focus shifted completely to making sure she was okay and supported in whatever way she needed. I stayed with her during labor for as long as she allowed. I helped where I could, kept things calm, and just tried to be present without making anything about myself. There wasn't really room for any discussions about earlier disagreements. It all became very immediate and practical. She was dealing with pain and fear, and it didn't feel appropriate to bring up anything else. When it got closer to the actual delivery, she asked me to leave the room. It wasn't said harshly, but it was clear and final. I respected it and stepped out without arguing. I waited outside until I was told I could come back in. I didn't see the moment my daughter was born. I wasn't there when it happened. But I came back shortly after, and I was still able to be part of those first moments in a different way. I got to cut the cord, and I was the first one to hold her. That meant a lot to me. It didn't erase everything I had felt leading up to it, but it was something I'm genuinely grateful for. For a while after the birth, things between me and my wife were relatively calm. The focus was on the baby, adjusting to the new routine, dealing with exhaustion, and figuring out how to function with very little sleep. There wasn't much space for conflict in those early days because everything was centered around immediate needs. As things settled slightly, the earlier issue came back up. I brought up how I felt about not being there for the birth. It wasn't an argument at first. I just wanted to talk about it, to understand it better and to feel like it mattered. She dismissed it. She said I was making a big deal out of something that only lasted a couple of minutes. That was difficult to hear. It made it seem like the entire experience, and what it meant to me, didn't carry any weight. That conversation is when I finally got a clearer explanation from her. She told me that the reason she didn't want me there was because she was afraid I would stop being attracted to her if I saw her during childbirth. That explanation shifted things in a way I wasn't prepared for. Up until then, I had assumed there might be something deeper or more complicated behind her decision, something related to anxiety about the process itself or control over the environment. Instead, it came down to how she believed I would see her. The reaction I had wasn't my best. I was already exhausted, running on very little sleep, and emotionally worn down from everything that had been building up. I lost my temper. I said things I regret. I told her I was disappointed in her as a mother and that she had put her vanity before both me and our child. That argument didn't resolve anything. It made things worse. It created distance that didn't go away afterward. She suggested marriage counseling not long after that. We agreed to it, but there was a wait for an available appointment. In the meantime, things at home were tense. There wasn't constant arguing, but there was a noticeable shift in how we interacted when we were alone. Conversations were shorter, more functional, and often avoided anything that might lead back to the same conflict. We both continued taking care of the baby and handling responsibilities, but the emotional side of things felt strained. It wasn't a complete breakdown, but it wasn't stable either. It felt like something unresolved was sitting in the background all the time. At that point, I knew it wasn't the ideal situation, especially with a newborn in the house. But I also couldn't ignore how I felt about everything that had happened. There was a part of me that still blamed her for how things unfolded, even though I also knew my reaction hadn't helped. I went back to work not long after. The time away from home did create some distance, and that helped in a practical sense. It gave both of us some space without it feeling like a deliberate withdrawal. It also made it easier to avoid constant tension, but it didn't solve anything. Eventually, things escalated to the point where we separated for a couple of months. It wasn't a sudden decision. It came after ongoing tension, unsuccessful attempts to move past the issue, and a general sense that we weren't making progress while living together in that state. During that period, we still communicated about the baby and handled responsibilities, but the relationship itself was on hold. It gave both of us time to step back and look at things more clearly. We did start marriage counseling during that time. It brought up more than just the original issue. Other problems that hadn't been addressed before started to surface. Some of them were connected to communication, others to how we handle stress, and a lot of it tied back to how she sees herself. She did apologize for keeping me out of the delivery room. It wasn't a defensive apology. She acknowledged that it hurt me and that it had affected our relationship. At the same time, she was also clear that if we have another child, she would make the same decision again. She said she still wouldn't be able to trust that I wouldn't lose attraction to her. That part didn't change, even after everything that happened. Through counseling, I started to understand more about how deep her insecurity about her appearance actually is. It wasn't something I had fully seen before. From the outside, she always came across as confident. She took care of herself, carried herself well, and never really showed doubt in a way that stood out. What became clear is that a lot of that was a front. The pregnancy seemed to make those insecurities worse, to a point where they affected decisions in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the birth. It showed up in other areas as well. After the baby was born, there were issues with breastfeeding that were tied to how she was managing her diet. She was eating very little because she wanted to lose the pregnancy weight quickly. That affected her milk production, which then caused more stress for both her and the baby. I asked her to hold off on dieting until the baby was a bit older. It wasn't about appearance at that point. It was about making sure the baby was getting what she needed. But for her, losing the weight was extremely important, and it took priority in a way I struggled to understand. That created another layer of tension. I wanted to support her, but at the same time, I couldn't agree with the choices she was making when they were affecting our child. It became difficult to balance being supportive with addressing something that felt like a real issue. Counseling has helped in some ways. It's given context to things that didn't make sense before. It hasn't fixed everything, but it has made it clearer what we're dealing with. At this point, we've decided to work on the marriage instead of ending it. That decision didn't come easily, and it's still something we're actively figuring out. There's no quick resolution, and there are still moments where the same frustrations come up. I've come to accept that if we have another child, I won't be present for the birth in the way I originally expected. It's not something I agree with, but it's something I understand better now, even if I don't fully accept it emotionally. We're continuing with counseling and trying to find a way to move forward that works for both of us and for our child.